Kia ora and welcome to a Yarn Live. Today we have another very special guest. Every guest is special, but for their own particular reasons. And I'd like to welcome Mahesh, who I first met, who I had the pleasure of meeting at Tech Week TV last year, and started to get to learn about this amazing character and guy who has achieved so much. And we're going to hear all about his story in the world of SaaS. Leaving New Zealand and going off abroad, we're going to hear about these big brands and these big numbers and these sort of global aspects. And we're going to get him to bring it down to New Zealand and give us a bit of a look at New Zealand from a global perspective. Being a Kiwi, that's he's got a foot in both camps, being a Kiwi and also being a global SaaS, we'll say expert, because frankly that's exactly where it is. And is now running his own organisation, Phase One Ventures, here in New Zealand, and really positively building and growing the SaaS market here in New Zealand. So with that, as always, Mahesh, could we ask you to introduce yourself, please, in the AFQY style, which starts with a little bit about yourself outside of the work picture, and then, of course, we'll come back to the work picture and go deep into the SaaS world with you.
Sounds good. Kia ora, Ryan. Hi to everybody else listening here. A little bit about myself. Moved to New Zealand on my own when I was 14. Grew up in Napier. Came to Auckland at uni. Started work here. Then went overseas to Tokyo for a few years. Then post an MBA. Got into startup land in Sydney. It was the first wave of startups after Atlassian. Learned a lot in my own being a CEO of a startup and being a founder. You learn a lot, and I learned a lot about product engineering, growth, etc. Was then invited to be the first head of people and a leader at Canva. Canva was about 25 people then. Now it's a 2,000 people company, and it's worth 40 billion and scaling north. Was a senior executive at Tasker, an interim CEO at Simply Wall Street, and as you mentioned, back home. I'm things I like. A little bit about me. Huge touch fan.
Really?
Yeah. I play a lot of touch. Well, when the knees are still working, and I play a bit of touch. I'm Tottenham Hotspur fan, unfortunately, and I like my my chicken kebabs. Nothing like a chicken kebab at 2 a.m. on Christmas.
Yeah. Well, I've got a funny story from Melbourne. I'll tell you a bit later on. I'll quickly tell you now, but I love kebabs as well. And a mate of mine that I grew up with, we went over to Melbourne for a week, just having a bit of fun. And we went down Lygos Street, and we'd had a few beers by the end of the night, and we're a bit shaky on it. And we're standing there looking at the menu, massive menu, and the guy behind the counter with a massive knife bangs the butt of the knife on the counter and goes, "Fucking hell, what you want, boys?" We just scampered out the door. All he was asking us was, "What food do you want?" We were just so shocked with this big knife glinting in his hand. We're like, "Whoa!" And we just took off out of there. But yes, we love a good kebab. Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah. It was during the 1990 Italian World Cup. Gary Lineker, Paul Gascoigne. So Gazza caught my imagination when I was young, and also like my favorite All Black by a country mile is Mertz. It's good, So got a soft spot for Mertz as well. For anybody else who's a Mertz fan.
Mertz is a bit of a character. Actually, he's in the banking in Australia now. I did hear him speak at a pre-All Blacks gig once, and he is as dry as a piece of toast, but bloody hilarious. So yeah, very cool. And the last thing that you mentioned was touch rugby yourself. So that I was a bit surprised about. But very cool. It's a great way to stay fit and healthy and get out and about. Probably not much touch in the last 100 days here in Auckland.
No. So I've it's a good excuse to let yourself go when you don't have to play team sport. But the good thing about touch, right, is so I'm a football player. That's what I did when I was growing up. The good thing about touch is it's such a team game, and there's a bit of structure. And if a good team and a good level of structure beats any flashy all-star set of guys or whatever it is. So you do your 3 ups, properly, focus, and then you spread the ball wide. It's good.
Coming back to Tech Week, the team behind the scenes used to always joke and say you always manage to wrap in a rugby analogy somewhere. But in this case, it's you, the last person I'd ever expect to. But you're so right. That's why the All Blacks win, the ultimate structure of the game. And I guess that maps across to when we get into the SaaS, because having seen a little bit from the stuff you do with Phase 1 and being on some of the courses, starting to learn the structures, and I'll chuck out some of the terms I've been learning. Growth loops. So in the last session earlier this week was all about growth loops, and I was like, oh, growth funnels is old school, but then no, how the growth funnel works into the growth loop, and then you can have multiple working together. And I'm just going, oh, this is mind-boggling. Probably what it's like for someone who doesn't understand rugby to try and be taught rugby at at that type of level I'm learning the SaaS. So very cool. Last question before we get into your background in a big way is you came to New Zealand when you're 14. Like, what a pioneer. What were you thinking? What's the story behind that? Were you an exchange student, or does it just like here?
well, so I my early years were in Singapore, and Singapore is a little bit of a pressure cooker when you're a kid. I was doing fine in school, but I don't know exactly what the policy was. It was during the Jim Bolger days. So there was a road show in Singapore with all the high schools from New Zealand, and it was starting to become fashionable to send kids to US, UK, Oz from Singapore. And I think my dad, we went to this road show, and my dad was like, okay, I think this is an even more economical option. And I'm someone who likes to be free. I'm quite pro risk. I like to invest back into myself, and these are clearly signals that I've done. I remember going through the pamphlet. The grass was green. There were horses. There were multiple sports teams for every code, and the girls were pretty. And I was like, okay, let's go. Let's. For me, it seemed like it was straight out of an Enid Blyton book, right? So, and I'm glad I went to Napier first, rather than Wellington or Auckland. Because it was grassroots New Zealand. And yeah, I still remember it was the first year, it was the year that the Warriors came out.
Oh, wow.
That was in New Zealand. There's a lot of learning. A lot of learning.
I bet there was. So my brother lived in Singapore for 7 years, and I was there for a week, and that 1 week was a lot of learning for me. So I can imagine coming from there to here, it would have been equally the reverse sort of surprise and shock, especially going from Singapore to Napier. It's like there's probably more people in the MRT, the tube, than there are in Napier.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's come back to your international experience, because this is the golden stuff that New Zealand can really learn and develop from. And while we've got Kiwis here who have done a lot of stuff abroad and been based here, you've essentially been based overseas in a range of different places, predominantly Oz. So you've got exposure to a different market. You've seen it develop. Probably it's definitely ahead of New Zealand. Any country bigger than New Zealand is ahead of New Zealand. So you've got all these experiences from all different angles. Before we get into that, could you give us a bit more detail about Canva? Starting around the early 20s, 25th person, scaling up to 200, because that's a key word that we hear in the vocab, scaling up. And that's what I think is one of the magic measures for VCs now. So it's not just about the idea, it's not about the product fit, or not just about it, but it's about the ability to scale. Can you go from the small hobby company to the massive 40 billion that Canva is now? So, yeah, give us some backstory.
For sure, Ryan. So so a few fun stories here. I had my own startup, and I was hustling. And if you do some research, you'll find a poster of me with my platform trying to get Uber and Canva and some other companies in there. And the way I got Uber onto my platform was I left because I was a startup founder. I could hardly afford anything. So I left packets of 3 Tim Tams outside the Uber HQ for like a week on end. And then they gave me a call and said, please stop giving us Tim Tams every day, and we'll just come on the platform. So I started building a rep in the market for being a good operator and a hustler. I decided not to follow through my startup because we hadn't built anything useful. We had seed funding on the table. I didn't feel right taking it because I didn't feel like I had a clear plan in regards to what to do with it. At that point, bumped into Cliff and Mel, and they said, "Hey, come on board, help us grow Canva." One of the first things that I realized, I realized now looking back, is that everything was so intentioned at Canva, right? Like you walk, I remember walking the first time going, whoa, something different is happening here.
Yeah.
And Jobs talks about being able to connect the dots backwards. So there's a whole bunch of things I'd like to connect in regards to, hey, these are good signals of what can end up becoming a high growth company. So when by the time I joined Canva, Mel and Cliff had already spent 8 years working on Fusion Books, which was designed for high school yearbooks. And it's a really important part of the story that most people don't know. So even though I joined Canva probably like a year after it had really taken to form, Mel and Cliff had been working on this project 8 years beforehand. So they had an incredible, this is from the age of 18. She was 18, he was 19. And they'd spent 7 years working on Fusion Books. So they had an incredible understanding of the customer and what they wanted, right? Like they'd been spending so much time, even though it was a small slice and a niche designed for high school yearbooks. And there's stories of Cliff just calling all the high schools in Australia, trying to pitch their like SaaS product for high school yearbooks, right? And they built that to a point. And then Mel decided that no, we can actually do it for design. We can democratize design for everyone. And she clearly had a really good understanding of the customer from all their time in Fusion Books. This was Blackbird's big first investment, and they invested into Canva without a product. And if I'm not wrong, they've only done that with two startups. One's Eucalyptus and one is Canva. Now, it makes sense why they did that. Here was a founder and a founding team who'd already built a successful tech business, not a startup. I want to be very clear to everyone's listening. A startup is something that's defined by high growth. 10% week on week, 7% week on week. High growth is what defines startup. But Mel and Cliff had created a tech business, right? And they'd gone through the rigmarole, and she had now a clear vision of how she wanted to work on a much larger play. So you absolutely back someone who has already built a business and who understands the rigmarole and has a clear vision. So I think that part of the story is important. The other part of the story I'd like to share is from day dot, given the time and effort that they'd put in, Mel was super clear about her ambition. We used to talk about being able to design all kinds of things on Canva, right? Like design couches on Canva, cars on Canva. I mean, we were joking around, but my suspicion is Mel's not joking so much. And if you look at the success they've had, you'd back her. So from day dot, she made sure that they were having conversations with people who had climbed Everest, right? Not people who'd just gone to this hill or that hill, who had done the scaling. Their first engineering advisor at Canva was the person who created Google Maps, Lars Rasmussen. And he had created a product called Google Wave in Google Sydney, and that team had imploded. And the first engineer the most senior engineer from Google Maps, from that team, joined Canva. So the story I'm trying to share here is that they constantly asked people who had seen a level of scaling to come in right at the beginning so that they had the right frames and they were thinking the right way. They were asking the right questions from a very early point. Because every time you make a decision, there's some sort of compromise you're making, absolutely, in life and in business, right? And there's some sort of debt that you're building up. So if you can ask the right questions and answer the right problems, to address the right problems right from the beginning, and you get those questions from people who've been there and done that, then it sets you up for scale. So I mentioned intention, spending a lot of time with customer, and asking the right questions from the right people as early as possible.
Well, that's yeah, that paints a really good picture. So just to summarize, so I've got Mel's name in my mind, but her partner is
Cliff.
Mel and Cliff.
Cliff.
So Mel and Cliff, when they were backed by Blackbird, they weren't fresh faced. They had 7 years experience of building a business, and had I guess that all bakes into that experience. Here's my rugby analogy. Who would you rather have on your team? The open side from the first 15, who's young and fresh and fast, or Richie McCaw towards the end of his career, who's a bit slower, but older, but all the experience in the world. And it's always, you'd always go Richie McCaw, the older Richie McCaw, not the younger Richie McCaw. So you're bringing on that right experience, and it pops up in all points of discussions. A flavour from Tech Week across all of these types of discussions was when bringing on investors is don't just look for the money, look for the strategic alliance, the connections, the experience, so it's bring that experience on board.
Yeah, I think, Ryan, there's nothing wrong with investors who want to give you money, right? But there's nothing wrong with people who may not have that experience. They have the best of intentions, and you trust that most people want you to succeed. And obviously, let's be frank, investors are looking for return on investment. At the end of the day, that's their job. And that is their job, right? And this is how the economy works, right? Like I give you some credit, some cash. I want you to do well. I'll get something back. We'll all celebrate. Right? It's a win-win. Yeah, it's a win-win, right? But you want to be careful about the advice you get and who you're listening to, and we want to be really conscious of that. And I think you may have heard me say this before. The most important person to listen to by a country mile is your customers.
Yeah. I knew that was coming. So, and that brings me back to another thing that we discussed at Tech Week, which really hit home for me, right? Because I think all of us in tech have got our idea in us, and I certainly have mine. And yes, it's related to rugby. But I think, in fact, you'll have to correct the phrasing of this, the wording of this phrase. But you said something about with your comment on your startup, and you said something like, I was wedded to my vision, and I needed to be wedded to the customer's vision, something along those lines. Yeah. And it made me reflect on, like, I've been sitting on this for so long. I had this dream that this is going to be the amazing answer to solving this problem. And already I've run into, while I've been sitting on it for 12 years, I've already run into challenges where the market has changed, in the sense that in rugby, they have removed all rep teams up to age of 16 to remove competition for young kids. And it's like, well, what drives improvement? Competition. If I think of Canva, I think of Adobe. Canva's eaten Adobe. I grew up as an art director using really expensive Adobe and Canva, $14 a month, and I can put 4 of my team on that same license. I don't have to buy 4 more licenses at $14. So, of course, the volume of people worldwide that can get onto that, and hence $40 billion valuation now. Not sure where Adobe is, but it's obviously doing well. But it was $3,500 to buy the software. So vastly different sort of models and markets. But coming back to that point, being focused on the customer, what the customer wants. Let's look at that and understand that picture a little bit more in terms of if I'm a SaaS company, how do I do that?
Yeah, so I think I'm fortunate to have been a founder before, right? So I know your pain, man. I know the desires and struggles and the dreams and feeling and all founders' pains around. Man, I've got everything's on fire. I just want to do this good thing for the world. I just want to make a difference, and I want to build a great business. And I've been an early operator of successful startups, and now in venture space. So it gives me a good figure, a good angle. A founder usually starts a startup because they want to change the world. Like, it's quite an irrational thing, right? Like it's like you have to. There's something glitching here to go like, all right, I'm going to work really hard, and I've got this vision that I want to make into reality. And I think that's really important. And that irrational story in your head is really important. But where you have to start is you've got to solve a problem for a customer. And this is really hard from an ego perspective, right? Like you've put all your story, you've told your mates, you're going to go do this thing, and you've got plans, and you're listening to clips about venture capital and investment, and you've watched The Social Network, and it's just going to be a hockey stick curve. What do you mean? I've got to solve a small customer problem. Which is exactly what you do. So it's really hard for a founder to distance themselves from the vision for a long period of time and just listen to the customer. So as you mentioned, we're doing a whole bunch of things. We have an incubation program called Foundations for Growth. And the most important part that we kind of guide the startups we work with, or just not even guide, we're just like there going, hey, spend more time with the customer. I actually think you need to spend 3 to 4 months doing qualitative, quantitative interviews, research, market research. You want to get to a point where the 50th interview that you're doing with a prospective customer, you're like, I know what they're going to say. I know the problem. Yeah. I know that they're going to tell me this, that they got up at this time, that this is when they had the problem. This is when they felt the pain. This is what's frustrating them about the alternatives. And this is and there are other stakeholders in the mix. You want to get to a point where you are really clear about the problem, and then you start to build, right? The issue is when you build to your vision, you're coming up with your interpretation of a solution, your interpretation of the customer problem, and then you try to sell it. And the idea sounds snazzy, but that it doesn't connect cleanly with the problem, with the exact interface, with what's happening in the brain of the customer, all the tension and pressure they have, etc. Right? So, can I give you an example of?
Please.
Yeah. So one of the companies that we're working with is a company called Salesforce Training, and these 2 young bright Kiwis coming out of just come out of Victoria, and there's real fire in Amber's eyes. She's the CEO. She stumbled across Salesforce, and she picked it up, and then she just put it on LinkedIn. Hey, anybody want to learn Salesforce? And instead of 5 people coming, 300 people came. And she was like, wait a second, there's a problem here. And now they've actually built a services business, right? Like, so they're actually giving Salesforce training. The longer term play is to build a platform where all sorts of people and companies could learn all sorts of enterprise applications, like whether it's MailChimp or Salesforce or SAP. But what I'm calling out is they are building that services business. They are getting paid to learn about the business, learn about the customer, right?
Yeah.
They're spending so much time with the customer, not dissimilar to how Mel and Cliff did, right, early on. So they're holding on, spending time, understanding the problem. And anyone looking to learn Salesforce, you should hit them up. But that kind of signal is really powerful for me, because I trust then that this person, that team, is going to really have a good grasp of the customer problem. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So it's quite intriguing. So did you say 500 or 300? I think I put 500 in the note, but was it 500 responses to the note about I'll train anyone on Salesforce? Yeah, well, there's definitely a opportunity there, and obviously the problem is no one else is servicing that need. But it's such a growing platform. Same here in New Zealand. There's a bunch of organisations that are doing it here in New Zealand, and I think it's Mission Ready HQ. I don't know if you know them, but Salesforce is their first vendor where they have taken their BA or dev program and turned it into a Salesforce specific one. But yeah, 500 people, like there's the sort of instant customer base and the prospect of a large growing customer base, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And there's another app called Celadon, which is about dealing with parents' anxiety for their children's math learning, right? And they're just providing tuition right now while they're building the product. But by providing tuition, they're spending time with the customer, right? And that's what you want to do. So anybody that's building a SaaS platform, figure out a way to constantly and consistently spend time with the customer. And if you can, provide some sort of service or some way, because then you really understand the user flow, the user experience, the workflow, what exactly the problem is, who's actually going to be paying for the product.
So you're telling me that I've got to hang out on the side of a rugby field watching rugby and talking to the spectators all day long?
That's exactly what I'm telling you. Tough life, right?
Sounds like a tough job.
Yeah, it's tough, bro.
Yeah. Now, just to go back to a few comments that we've got here. So first of all, there was David Morrison. I don't know if you know David. Not sure where he is now, but he was the commercial director of Internet NZ, so squarely in the space around SaaS. Great to have your input there, mate. Really appreciate it. Then we have one who may not show up his name, but I've got it here on LinkedIn. It is VJ Known Party. Don't know if you know VJ, but he's pointing out something. We've got another point on this one as well, which is solving the issue for the customer should be part of the vision. Then you will not have to distance yourself from the vision to listen to the customer. That makes really good sense on paper. Is that the reality? Was I maybe getting a little bit skew to the side there with my excitement from your comment back at Tech Week time?
It's really hard, Ryan. Like so the way I work with and like I said, we have this incubator program, but the way when I first meet with founders, right, the first thing I ask them is, why are you doing this? Right. And I spend an hour and a half, 2 hours just listening to their life story. Because especially when you work early stage, when you're trying early stage founders, it's personal. And you really want to hear why they're doing it, where it's coming from. And I think that helps to build trust, and rightfully so. It's a precious thing working with early stage founders, in my opinion. And then I ask them, what the problem is. And I find that founders who've actually already built a bit of a product and they're trying to get it going, they usually go, hey, that's, I would like your help in regards to how to fix this and help me grow faster. And if you watch high growth videos by Casey Winters, who is considered one of the best people in growth. He was the first head of growth at Pinterest. Andrew Chen, who was the head of growth at Uber. So many of them talk about, what's most important for growth? You need a great product. You need something that's actually retaining users, because you can't grow something with a leaky bucket, right? So it's hard. I find that it's hard for founders who've actually built something to go back to the whiteboard. And no, you got to go spend time with the customers. So it is really hard because sunk cost bias kicks in. But I've done so much, and I know this is going to work, and I believe this is going to work, and it's hard. Yeah, I know, because I've been there. So,
yep, and I'm just thinking about myself, right? Because I was going to joke that every Kiwi, or not every Kiwi, but sort of the stereotype is that every Kiwi is an armchair critic of the All Blacks, right? So of course, between tech and rugby, I'm like, yeah, I think I know it. So it's actually been really awakening, and I'm preparing myself for the shock of the century that what I think is right is not going to be right. So I'm really open to walking around the fields. And one of the things, here's a bit of a test for myself, which might actually help other people in the same position. I was thinking I would walk around and ask the people about the situation, and possibly have just some paper drawings. And say, if you had an app that, first we'll start the discussion and talk about it, but then say, well, if you had an app that worked like this, would that enable you would you be interested in doing this function to achieve this result? And I'm already thinking, as I say that, it's like I'm almost biasing them to what I think is the solution already. and that will end up in failure and tears. So I've got to detach myself from the thing I think is what I want to build, and find out what they want me to build. Yeah,
Exactly right. Well, it's not necessarily, right? It's not about finding out what they want you to build. What is their problem?
What is their problem? Oh, okay.
What is the problem, right? Like you just want to understand what their problem is, what the hierarchy of problem is, what is the biggest problem, what does it look like, where does it look like? Customers, and this is a very famous Henry Ford quote around, if you ask them whether they wanted a car, they would have said, I want faster horses. He's absolutely right. Like it's really hard for a customer to imagine a solution, but they can tell you, they are the ones who are going to tell you their problems. So you just need to understand their problems. And if I may, Ryan, a little tip, never ask customers, will you do this? Will you do that? Never ask, or try not to ask future statements. Ask about past behavior. Because customers, you and I, in any survey, will you buy this? Yeah, sure, I'll buy it. Sure, I'll do this. Sure, I'll do that. And we all deceive ourselves and then end up lying about these things. So you ask, hey, when did you experience this pain? What was it like? What did you do then? Why did you do that? How did you feel? So you ask about past, and then you just track that spectator after spectator after spectator after spectator, and then you categorize the spectators into 20-year-old women, 30-year-old men, 40-year-old men. Come at 9 o'clock. Come for first 15, second 15 rugby, high school rugby, and you build like this database, this categorization of all of these different customer groups and all the different problem types, and you lay it all across, and then you go, okay, I think this group of people have this problem, which is they really want it solved, and that's where you start. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The gears are turning. I better flick out of that and come back to the interview. So just to check, we're on 32 minutes. Are you all right for a little bit of extra time?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, cool. So let's put a 5 to 10 minute on it, so the people that are watching know. And of course, I'm time stamping and adding comments. And the value is that people can find those comments and go to that point of the video to look at it. So ideally, if someone grabs someone. I just want to bring one last comment up from very early on. Mark Kidd, so he's got a SaaS product. I'm pretty sure. I hope I don't get it wrong, but it's Safe 365 with Andrew Steele involved. But that was back when we were talking about, I said the Richie McCaw thing about, having everyone experience. And he said, maybe it's a combination of old and new. And just made me think, sometimes some fresh eyes and someone who's maybe not even, in my case, not even a rugby person would bring a really interesting perspective. And I've seen it happen before. So I was quasi-product managing the build of a automated workforce system. If the man in the van gets his job and it works it all out for him, just tells him where to go and what to do. And one of the people on the team, this very quiet Vietnamese lady who I didn't know but had a PhD in web technologies, just sat there quietly and said, why are you doing it that way? What if we enable it this way? And then you cut out all those 4 steps beforehand. I was like, do that. Let's do that. But coming back to the question for yourself, have you got any experiences where you've seen someone new to the picture just add a epiphany level change to the tact of things?
Yeah. I taking your analogy, I didn't make a comment at that point. I think, and it's not about age, but you need youthful exuberance, and youthfulness is not age specific, right? Like there's nearly a little bit of naivety. Like the younger Richie McCaw,
Yes.
You've just got to charge. You just got to charge. You got to go make the mistakes. You got to, and you fall down, you get back up, you keep going, right? And someone who's more experienced may not break new ground, right? Like may not be desperate to do it all over again, etc. But their lessons and the experience, and especially at pivotal moments, hey, think about it this way. think about it that way, right? I put it across from that perspective, because there's something really powerful about naivety, right? Like the number of founders that would go, man, I didn't know this was going to be this much work. Like, this was intense. And, I mean, I have to say, probably the most profound thing, and I've been through a fair few things in my life, the most profound thing I've ever experienced is getting into startup land. Because it really helps you, and being successful and winning, right? Because it helps you connect the dots on so many different levels. But I think there's something you said about the new around being naive. Got to try things, got to spend more time with the customer, got to break things. Okay, got to get up, screw it up, get up again. Co-founder left, oh fine, like keep going. But then listening to having the ear of the right people, right? So.
Excellent. So I just want to come back to one last question, and then we'll go for our sort of closing remarks and wrap up. This is a good question from Mark. Actually, you touched on it yourself when you mentioned Apple. So he's asking for your thoughts on counterculture, and I thought of the same quote about it. Was it Steve Jobs? But Steve Jobs definitely said it. But I think also when Sony made the Walkman, no one was asking for the Walkman, right? But yeah, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. So
yeah, absolutely, right. But it's really important to not overvalue that, because that's what's sexy, and that's what everybody thinks. Steve Jobs I assume he had an incredible understanding of the customer, right? Like, he knew the customer, he knew the customer problems. So you only get to produce like a powerful solution, a like defining solution, if you know the customer and the customer problems incredibly well. So if you haven't done that time, if you haven't done that penance, it's really hard to build something that really creates incredible value. And in today's market, with software and startup being so prevalent, and trust me, we're talking about Web 3.0. We're still at the early days of Web 2.0. It's getting noisy. Customer expectations are higher and higher and higher and higher. So you better build something that people love. To do that, go spend time with a customer.
Absolutely. So before we get on to the next thing, what's the definition from your perspective of Web 3.0 versus Web 2.0? People will be asking that. And I kind of have a rough, and I've got little bits of examples and chuck some words out there, but you probably got a pretty good definition if you could help us out with that.
Sure. I'm not an expert, but I'm definitely starting to learn more and more. So Web 2.0, basically, it's two-dimensional, right? Like, it's a flat screen, right? And Web 3.0, I'm fully immersed, right? Like, I'm living in the world. I'm going to the museum of NFTs. My rights are guaranteed in this world. Property rights of the house that I've built in this virtual world is guaranteed, while in some countries the legislation property rights aren't so strong, right? And New Zealand property rights are fine, right? So I can fully immerse and experience this world and interact with anybody around the planet, and trust exists in this virtual world. So much of what we do for the economy to really function is around trust, right? And Web 3.0 is a space where technology is ensuring that trust and credibility cannot be corrupted. Well, that's the promise anyway.
That is the promise, yeah. Well, hey, look, I'm not a fan of Mark Zuckerberg for the history of some of the things that have happened around it, but when I started seeing the metaverse, and I know with what was it, Second Life. You go back to the days of Wolfenstein and Doom. The original sort of 3D player games and all the variations. But if you think about cloud, cloud didn't work in 1956 with the mainframe. Cloud didn't work in the 90s with ASP, but it did work, and we are here now. So I sort of think it's about time. So either today or tomorrow, my Oculus V2 is turning up from, I've been tracking it on FedEx, but I decided rather than going, oh yeah, that's another thing. Like I've grown up around tech, so I'm kind of a little bit blasé to it. But I thought, no, this time I'm going to get in there and get involved. Like it's weird. I work in tech, live and breathe tech, but I can also sometimes be a little bit blasé about the new things coming. So I thought, yep. And I spent the weekend playing games on Roblox.
Oh, wow.
And you talk about trust, right? So someone recognized I was a noob. Lola9 I was in a game, and Lola9 just keep smashing me. So every time I'm trying to build my strength up to be able to get to the next level, Lola9 would come along and go boom first. And I was like, and when you start talking about trust, I was like, yeah, trust me, I was getting pretty annoyed with Lola9. But yeah, started getting into that space because it relates to potentially where the customers will take rugby in the future. But let's come back to sort of closing remarks, right? Because we wanted to get a little bit of a perspective on New Zealand. When I heard you speak, we had Jonathan on your phase 1 interview series. He spoke, and this is the guy from Airtasker, everybody. He spoke about how basically over his talk, he explained the maturity of the Australian market from his early days to there were no VCs, but we just basically raised money and now there's this quite formalized not formalized but quite known process that everyone within the ecosystem works to, and there's money, there's VCs, there's startups, so where is New Zealand, do you think? Where are we on the maturity map?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Ryan. I mean, for me, this is the most important thing I'm doing right now in my life. Like New Zealand is the most important thing in my life, and helping the New Zealand startup ecosystem is a big part of that. We need a few high growth companies. So I want to make it very clear to everybody. Fine, tech, but more so than tech, we're talking about high growth businesses, right? Companies that have built something people love and that are just growing and accelerating at incredible pace. And there are so many problems to be solved for construction workers, for financial sector, for mothers, for fathers, like so many things that there's an opportunity to be automated and solved. And this is going to happen more and more. The most important thing for a powerful, valuable startup ecosystem is a critical mass of good quality engineering universities, because you need the builders. And I want to be very clear. Building a high growth startup is not just about software engineering and engineers. There's a whole bunch of other things, but that critical mass is a big signal of, we've got like one of the key things to build a vibrant startup ecosystem. New Zealand absolutely has that required level of skill set. And we have such a strong culture of being good generalists who are problem solvers, because we don't have everything. So we figure things out. And unlike the US, where you can buy like every niche service, product, etc., we don't get that. So we will solve problems. What New Zealand needs, though, in my opinion, is that access to audacity, right? We can build something in New Zealand that will take over the world. And Xero has had a really good crack at it and has done a great job, but we need more. That founders from the beginning, I am building something that's going to solve a small customer problem today, but it's going to solve this problem for many, many customers all around the world. And that's my vision, and it's going to shift in a certain way. So we have enough money in the ecosystem. Money is not an issue, and it bothers me a little bit when we celebrate like raises, and this is common in all ecosystems. Hey, we raised this. Hey, we raised that. Great. Let's talk about customer love. Let's talk about customer metrics. One of the coolest things from the beginning of Canva was on Twitter, you would see, I love Canva, I love Canva, I love Canva, I love Canva, I love Canva. That's what we want to be celebrating, right? Like, I think Kami is doing a great job. Halter is doing a great job in regards to delivering customer value and moving the needle. So I think what New Zealand's, if we can get that critical mass of experience and inject it into early stage founders in regards to how to think about the problem very early on, before giving up too much equity, before building too much, before hiring too many people, because like I said, sunk cost bias kicks in and it's really hard to go backwards. How do I think about a growth engine? How do I think about something which automatically just like sells to more and more and more and more people? If we can do that, and it's completely doable for us. If we can get that learning in, then we should be able to build some really even more high growth startups.
Awesome. And on the note of growing these high growth startups, question from Neil here is sort of about that, and it might relate back to the growth loops and some of the things you're talking about with customer love. So Neil's been on the show before with a couple of his clients, Timberlands and NZDF, and they certainly, and this is an enterprise product rather than a consumer product like say Canva, or it's also a business product, but it's dealing at the B2B sort of level. But his question is, any thoughts around how to successfully amplify your message once you've identified the problem you're solving and have success stories to share, so you can build awareness and create more opportunities? So by the sounds of it, I know that this is a thing for Neil, is he wants everyone to know, just because with doing the call, I know just how good it works, right? So how does what's the growth engine, I think is the term I'm going to bring in here. What's the growth engine he needs, what someone in his position might use to get that message out effectively?
Yeah, so something I've found, which is a common thing with high scale startups, is once you've gotten to a certain point, you actually want to bring on board a head of growth. Or it's effectively, I mean, if a startup is about growth, right? Like, and a CEO of a startup has already worked, and the founding team has worked really hard in regards to identifying the problem, building a great product, building a company. They're stretched. They are stretched. You need another brain, someone who you trust, who's fully focused on growth, and who's thinking very clearly, where are my customer eyeballs? When do they have this problem? How do I hit them? And you nearly want that person to own and think very clearly, write a strategy document. What's in that strategy document? Let's do incredible analysis, detailed analysis on everything that's happened before. How did the customers get our product? Where did they find us? Where did they do this? And then let's also look at adjacent products. Maybe not even the same space, but kind of the same problem in a different industry. How did they go about this? How did they go about that? And you're writing this document, thinking through all the work. And then what you want to use is this thing called a RICE framework. People can go look it up. It's a way of assessing which marketing experiments you want to run, right? Impact, ease of execution, etc. So just look it up. So you want to do all of that thinking, work out the marketing strategy, growth strategy, and then start running experiments, right? And you want to be, there's a book called Lean Analytics. Check it out. You really want to be extremely data driven. This many customers were hit this way. What was the conversion? Why did they apply, etc.? And you want to go through this process for 3 to 6 months to figure out a growth engine. You may find, I actually need to go build a whole other website that all these B2B customers go onto this website because they want this like very light tool that's actually really valuable. And from that light tool, then they come into our acquisition funnel, right? So for example, Canva used to created all kinds of like simple little things, web pages to, I think it was like a greeting card maker or some things like that would then pull customers in. But to come up with all of those tactics and strategies, you really need someone to be thinking about it like exclusively. And it's really hard for the CEO or the leadership team who like worked so hard to build this, and you're trying to maintain what you've built, right?
Yeah.
So you need a person to own, hey, your responsibility, how are we growing this? Right. And obviously it's the CEO's call at the end of the day, and they need to be connected to the CEO's vision and problems. But you need someone really focused on thinking about this. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. And, as a founder of AFQY, not a SaaS business, but a business that talks about SaaS among other technologies. I'm just looking at bringing on contract sales, and I'm going through the conniptions of I've got to hand over the responsibility of my baby to someone else. Being ex-sales, ex-marketing, that's sort of a I know it best. That comes back to, and probably time to pop this comment up, is that bringing in someone fresh may bring a whole new perspective and sort of clear out my cobwebs. So I'm on both sides. I'm going, oh, holy cow, and oh, wow, this could be really exciting. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But as AFQI is growing, I need someone to be focused on sales, and it's killing me to do everything, right? So not doing everything. There's writers, events manager, social media person, but getting the balance of the revenue still coming in while managing the team and the work, going through those wee bumps.
I mean, there's a really good point there, right, Ryan? So I mentioned just before we kicked off that there's this guy called Jason Calacanis. He was if you look, I think it's called Startup Week or whatever, you go on YouTube. He is kind of the voice and podcast guru of startups in Silicon Valley. And he was the first kind of scout who identified Uber, etc. He does exactly what you do, right? And he's tremendous. He's a great guy, wonderful, not dissimilar to yourself, Ryan. So it'd be wonderful for you to go read up on it.
Yeah, right? Well, it's like you mentioned before, looking at what your competitors do. I won't say he's a competitor because he's probably way ahead of me, but someone in the same space and things that I can learn. And I've been checking out a range of them, and obviously that's something that everyone here with their SaaS in mind should be doing. And the other thing I'm going to say, because we're just on we have to wrap up before 11, is that potentially they should be speaking to you and looking at getting involved with Phase 1 Ventures. So let's use that as our last question, is if we want to get involved, or if we want to get involved with your services and get your help properly full-time, or how do we engage with Phase 1 Ventures? Is it you tell us, we won't guess.
Yeah, sure. So we haven't really made it that public, but right now there are 13 companies incubating with us, early stage founders, early stage businesses, and we are going to be raising a pre-seed fund, of which I'll be investing 10% of my own money into the fund. But it's not really about the money, right? Like I spend 4 to 5 hours every week with these startups. As the incubation program grows, I'll bring other experienced operators to connect with these startups intimately. So because I can obviously do everything. If you're interested, hit me up on LinkedIn, connect to me, send me a message. Even better, email hello@phase1.ventures. And I want to be very clear: the incubation program is all about the startups that really end up doing well, or we end up working with it. Is they've got a problem they desperately want to solve, and they've got some traction, like something, and there's some evidence of I'm ready to get stuck into this, and then we're going to spend quite a bit of time right at the beginning going, all right, like let's slow down, let's think very cleanly, let's really understand the problem, and it's probably going to take 2-3 months. And you're going to do all the work. I and the other operators are just going to stand and go, you may want to go back to the drawing board now, because it is a bit of a drunken walk, that part of the journey. And then after that, okay, what are the next steps in regards to building and testing and iterating and all that? So,
Very cool. So, I think there'll probably be a few people that want to get in touch. Certainly comments and the view counters have been fluctuating up into the high numbers there for our average. Which means it'll probably go on to be one of our higher viewing shows, which is great news. And I might pop an email through to that place myself. Feeling pretty confident about what I've learned here today and what I've learned over time. It'd be good to actually, see if I can put it into real action, because that's the last thing, is that in some ways it's validation, right? So things may not be the perfect answer. You haven't built the perfect product. You don't want to have that at that point. But the validation of working with an organization like Phase 1 Ventures, with the experience involved in it, is that, there's something there. And therefore you should sink your heart and blood, sweat, and tears into it. So, closing remarks to finish out today. What's your message to everyone out there in SaaS land, whether they're early stage, late stage, any stage? What's your message to people out there in SaaS land?
Yeah, my biggest message is congratulations, right? Like it's being a founder, being an entrepreneur is an amazing thing. New Zealand needs more. We need to generate more and more valuable companies, which create more and more value for our country. It's a tough road. It's a road that many people, your friends and family, don't get. So I have full respect and admiration for that, and especially having been a founder myself. The other big thing is please spend time with your customers. They have the answers. It's really hard, I think, funding, and we are getting some of the larger, more later stage VC firms starting to chat with us now and go, hey, we think you're doing something really cool. How do we partner with you? And I'm really appreciative of some of the larger funds in New Zealand, like Movac, GD1, and Blackbird's here, and all of those guys, right? It's good. It's good that these guys are there supporting at later stages. But my strong suggestion is don't worry about the money. Go spend time with the customer and the problem. You go solve that customer problem darn well, and you build something people love. Raising is so much easier, and building a high growth business is easier. On a small note, raising is actually the most suckiest part of building a startup. And it's a lot easier to raise if you've built something people love and you're growing. The numbers are just taking off and you have a crazy vision, right? So get those things sorted. So that would be my overriding mission. And come say hi. Hit me up on LinkedIn and hello at phase1.ventures.
Awesome. Great advice. Like, that's probably one of the better summary sentences at the end of a show, taking us from sort of beginning to end with a couple of gotchas to keep an eye out for. So thank you very much for your time, Mahesh. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to hearing more stories about the 13 organisations that you've got currently working with you, and the future venture or the fund that you're raising. So yeah, last thing is once again say thank you for all the insights, information, experience, and it's great to have that global experience brought back home and shared with us Kiwis, so that we can get out there amongst the world.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. All right.
All right.
Thank you very much, team.